We're not talking about the best of them. We're just talking about the rest of them.
Not the worst parts, but the best parts. And the best parts we have. The best of the rest.
Hello, and you don't want to see me when I'm hungry. Welcome to Best of the Rest, the show where we take a second look at movies that were poorly received upon release and challenge ourselves to only talk about the things we like and what the movie does well. It's comic book month, and this week we are talking the 2022 film Morbius. My name is Chris Logan, and I am joined, as always, by the living co-host, Andrew Williams. Andrew, are you ready to talk some Morbius?
I know we've said before that other movies have been the truest test of our core concept, but I believe we have reached the zenith of that argument with Morbius this week. So I am excited to talk about it, dive into all the positives that this movie brings, and also its just strange kind of existence. It's a very the whole thing and kind of culture that came about it is very odd.
When I remember hearing, seeing the trailer for the first time 8 years ago, and thinking like they're making a Morbius movie. It's just so strange. Of all the characters, like Morbius is the main character, the lead, the hero, the good guy, a Morbius movie. And knowing that Sony kind of had this weird universe of Spider-Man without Spider-Man, I was like, that's such a weird thing. And then you finally see it, and it's like, yeah, that's a weird thing. That's like, it wasn't. Part of you was like, well, let me just kind of see what they're up to. Maybe they, there's a take or an angle or something that I'm not seeing here. I think Venom was kind of like that. When you first hear about Venom without Spider-Man, it seems odd, and it is. And then you see it, and it, to me anyway, it kind of started to make sense. And I get why they made this. I mean, we talked about both those movies already. I enjoy them. But Morbius doesn't really escape that weird area for me, and I'm glad you bring up our concept itself, Andrew. As you know, as everyone here knows, this is a hashtag positivity podcast. Our goal is to look at these movies and dig for what works. We acknowledge maybe the movie itself isn't great, maybe it doesn't work overall. We're not trying to convince you to like it. We get that. We don't love every movie we cover in our podcast, but we challenge ourselves to find the things that do work, the hidden performances, the gems, the cool scenes, the action, something. And this is, I mean, we're going to get to all those things, but I can tell you right now, I'm not going to lie, this is the tough one. I have very few notes as I watched the movie, and it was an almost surreal feeling, Andrew, finally watching this. I didn't catch it in theaters. I just watched it this week for the podcast. I kind of knew the reception and the legend of it and everything. And I don't know what to... you know what it kind of reminds me of? All right, if you think back to 2007, when you saw Spider-Man 3, I think I was 7, no 6, or 7. We saw Spider-Man 3 in theaters for the first time. And specifically, the emo Peter Parker walking down the street, doing finger guns, dancing. Like that feeling you had when you're seeing the theater and you're like, I kind of can't believe I'm watching this. I can't believe it's this year and I'm seeing this on the screen after what came before it, And it's that feeling from that one scene in Spider-Man, but across an entire movie. The entire movie, I kind of couldn't believe I was seeing this in the year 2023.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting way of putting it. This movie came out last year, by the way. But
I didn't see it until 2023.
That's true.
I can't believe I'm watching this now, but I'm sure I would have felt the same way in 2022.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned it at the end of our show last week, and you just touched on it. But the trailers for this they came out pre-COVID, and so you saw trailers for this I legit saw trailers for this for almost like 2 full years. and it was the same trailer too for like a year and a half of that. So anytime you went to the movies, you saw the same trailers again and again and again. And I was just like, I cannot wait for this to be out and done with. Just not even about the movie, just so that I don't have to watch this trailer anymore. It's, but I think that's a good way of putting it. Like, it just feels like, you know, I've heard people, and this is going to sound kind of backhanded, but I don't mean it that way. But you've heard people say that this feels like a superhero movie from another time. And like, it feels like a 2000s superhero movie. And this, I think, kind of really does. Like, it fits into a lot of that stuff they were trying there of like, let's make this like this strange standalone film because, you know, people don't want superheroes, but they'll go okay for this. And like, you know, right alongside the idea of like Spider-Man dancing in the streets with the black suit with his emo hair and everything, like, I can see some scenes of this movie existing just alongside that, or almost being these weird, like, analogs almost. It's just a weird thing. It really, really is. I don't know how else to say it.
It's weird. Yeah, look, we're gonna talk about the things that we do like in this movie. We are getting there, but I can't. You know, I don't want to mince my words here. In the beginning, it's a heck of a thing, Andrew. The ultimate challenge to our concept, I think, is probably a pretty good way to put it. It's definitely in like an elite class of episodes with like you know, going all the way back to maybe like the Spirit. I mean, it's kind
the
of
Spirit or Fan Four Stick.
Yeah, that's the elite three right there.
Yeah, that's the cream of the
we're
crop,
building our own
were.
Sinister Six here, halfway there. Man. That's a whole other thing. The teases in this. All right, look, we'll get to
them.
Let's set the stage here. I guess real quick history with the movie. I said I didn't watch it until this week. Andrew, I know you saw this in theaters, right?
I did. As I see most things in theaters, it happens. This was early 2022, so we were kind of just starting to get movies back in theaters full time again. You know, the Warner Brothers notoriously kind of released all of their 2021 slate day and date digital with theatrical and streaming at the same time. So 2022 is when you started to get shifted back into we're going back to the theater. So I would say that, you know, wanting to watch new movies was the motivation, but I watch everything anyway. It's not like it matters. But this was still when numbers, I think, were being pretty heavily impacted by COVID, though. Especially for stuff that wasn't considered like must-see. Like Spider-Man obviously did gangbusters, but Morbius, I think, definitely fell into that class of like, if you weren't really interested, you weren't going to like, let's go check out Morbius. That's not really something you were still doing even then. So, but yeah, I did see it in theaters. I watched it. I digested it. And I moved on with my life. Like a pouch of artificial blood, you might say.
Sucking it down. The movie was released April 1st, 2022.
That also was not lost on me when I watched it in theaters.
We try to be a snark-free podcast, and there's plenty of jokes you could make about that. I left it alone, but it's got to be acknowledged. This movie was released on April Fool's Day. It's been acknowledged.
All right, moving on.
It was made on a budget of $75 million. At the box office, it actually brings in $167 million. That's not blowing the doors off, but it's a relatively modest budget considering it's like A-list led superhero movie. It makes its money back. I mean, like I'm guessing marketing is pretty bloated because, like we said, it was advertised for at least 12 years. So there's probably some stuff not being taken into account. Certainly, they wanted more money returned at the box office, but this isn't like an all-time bomb or anything. I mean, it's over 2 times its production. That's not bad. That's fine. You know, we probably don't have Morbius 2 coming anytime soon, but it was more money than I expected when I started looking into it.
Yeah, so I mean, this puts it pretty firmly into the probably you made all your money back, but probably didn't make a whole lot of extra off of it. But yeah, I mean, a lot of that, I think about 73 of that, 75 is domestic, and then there's almost 100 that's international. And so it is an internationally stacked box office to a degree. But it was, yeah, I was actually more than I remember. But this was also, again, when, like I said, if you weren't a major release, your box office was definitely still struggling at this time. And Sony, especially, because they didn't have an outlet for streaming, really. Like Warner Brothers did the deal with HBO because it's their streaming service, and Disney had all the Disney Plus if they wanted to throw stuff up there, and Paramount had Paramount Plus, and there's but some of those, there's a lot of them now, but this was one where they just really didn't have an outlet. So Sony was one of the big theaters or big studios that was like only in theaters. Jared Leto's Morbius. And I was like, okay.
Critically, it is not well received. It is panned by critics. It holds a 15% critic score on Rotten Tomatoes. Oof. This is like among our lowest that we've ever covered. I think Fantastic was around here, like 17% maybe. I've said it before, it's hard. It's genuinely hard to get below 20% on Rotten Tomatoes. Less than 1 in 5 critics saying, hey, it's worth checking out. It is difficult to do. Typically, the under 20% is reserved for movies that are borderline nonsensical or broken or don't have a plot you can follow. Again, not to keep beating up on a movie cover for, Fantastic checks all those boxes with its troubled history and how it comes out. So it is very, very negatively received. I guess this is a fine time to acknowledge that the audience score on Rotten Tomatoes is 71%. But this isn't like a Venom situation where it's just audiences are seeing things critics aren't or feel a different way about it. This is I don't know, positive review brigading. Like this is,
it's astroturfing. It's astroturfing.
Is that a term? Is that real?
It's astroturfing is when you are. It is a concerted effort to change the perception of something. In short, it's it's a form of astroturfing where basically people went in and made the critics score all higher. I'm making sure I'm using this term correctly now because now I'm convincing myself.
You check your term, but just as an example, like I looked at these reviews, and there's something called a verified audience review. I don't know what it means to be verified, but here's an example. Morbius, 5-star review. Morbius truly has to be one of the films released in 2022 so far. Jared Leto did a job playing Morbius, and the action was in the film. The film has storytelling, and CGI was animated. You get it. It's like a whole paragraph of this.
A whole paragraph of saying nothing.
A lot of reviews that are simply, it's time. I'm not going to say
of all
it,
the
Andrew.
movies that exist, this is one of them.
Yes. But there's the internet, the tagline for this movie, the big joke, and these aren't genuine reviews, I guess is the best way to say it. So I was using the term correctly because astroturfing is used to mean the opposite of grassroots, essentially. That's the whole purpose of the term because astroturf is fake grass. But basically, it is a concerted effort to typically, I guess it's not quite astroturfing because there's not like Sony didn't pay these people to boost up the reception of the movie. But in that regard, I guess it kind of is a grassroots thing where fans are just flooding it to give it this positive reception that they don't actually believe in. So it's sort of a mixture of both, but astroturfing is what came to mind of people mention that with stuff like Sound of Freedom and creating a perception that's not real. That's a really clever term.
It is.
Instead of grassroots,
it's very clever. That's why I like it. It's why I like it. But yeah, it was definitely a concerted effort by the internet culture that kind of birthed out of this movie to create this positive notion, kind of create maybe that, or maybe, I don't really know if it was to create anything. I think they just thought it was funny. Like, I think that, that's probably all it really was at the end of the day.
Let's take a look at the creative team behind the movie. It is written by the writing team of Matt Sazama and Burke Sharpless. As a duo, they are responsible for Dracula Untold, The Last Witch Hunters, and Gods of Egypt. Look, there's a chance we cover their entire filmography before our podcast is said and done. Certainly a few qualifiers in there, Andrew.
Even alums of the show, to a degree, as they do have a story credit on Power Rangers from 2017. Obviously, Dracula Untold is probably a great candidate for this podcast. It was definitely a movie that was supposed to launch its whole shared universe of things, and it did not. Last Witch Hunter, Gods of Egypt, both kind of notorious flops. But yeah, they are also apparently been tapped to write the upcoming Madam Web film, because Sony's shared universe of Spider-Man characters, now just Sony Spider-Man universe, is moving on. You know, whether the fans want it or not, we are getting more of the SSU, which again sounds like a university. There was apparently also some uncredited rewrites by the team of Art Marsom, and Matt Holloway. They are also alums of the show, having worked on Men in Black International and Punisher Warzone. Also have writing credits on the original Iron Man and Transformers: The Last Night, as well as the Uncharted film. And they are also working on the upcoming Kraven the Hunter film. So they apparently came in. Maybe they were responsible for some of the rewrites after the divergence from kind of the No Way Home stuff. Who knows? But they are obviously also in that Sony web of creators, as it were.
See
that? You see that, Chris?
It's pretty good.
I'm very clever. So yeah, a couple of different groups here all bringing this to life. All the more confusing on the final product.
And the movie is directed by Daniel Espinosa. Now, a number of films under his belt, a lot of independent stuff, probably most significantly before this, the 2017 movie Life, starring, amongst other people, the greatest actor of all time, Jake Gyllenhaal. I have not seen that movie yet, but I really want to. I remember seeing the trailers and being like, oh, well, this is Alien. Like, this is very clearly like an Alien knockoff. And then the reception I heard was like, yeah, it's an Alien knockoff, but it's pretty good. Like, it's pretty fun. Like, it knows, make no bones about it. Like, it's in that family, it's in that school. The influences are strong, but it's a fun time. So I've been interested to watch that ever since. Have you seen that one?
I have. I mean, it's got Jake Gyllenhaal and Ryan Reynolds like playing off of each other, so that alone kind of makes it worth the price of admission. If Ryan Reynolds' personality is not off-putting to you, it actually is responsible for one of my favorite interview moments of all time, because the press tour was Ryan Reynolds and Jake Gyllenhaal sitting next to each other the whole time. So basically, like, nothing was ever accomplished by asking them any questions. Yeah. But there was one where somebody asked them, they were like, is it really, really cool shooting a movie set in space because you get to wear socks all day? And they both just like, it was like their minds were blown. They were both just like, oh my God, it is. They were like, this, you're not, and then they're talking about like, it's like you're wearing a onesie, you're wearing pajamas, it's so comfortable. Like, I get to the end of the day and I'm like, can I just wear this home? This is so great. Like, they just launch into this tirade about how shooting a movie set in space is the most comfortable you can be as an actor because of the wardrobe. So
that's a detail I never would have thought of. That is what an observation.
And it's like they'd never thought of it before either. But like in that moment, their brains like exploded with just like, yes. Anyway, Alien is Life is kind of a mix of like Evolution meets Alien. Like it's a little bit of like the process of the thing is a little bit more like Evolution without the comedy, and then you've got it evolves into an alien situation, if you will. So yeah, it's pretty good. Like it's an enjoyable time at the movies. It's very much one of those movies where I'm like if it's on, I'm going to watch it because it's a very likable cast. Rebecca Ferguson's in it too. Hiroyuki Sanada, quite a good group of people there. And it's not bad. I remember when it came out though. Go ahead.
Describing Ryan Reynolds that way, I think is perfect. Would you say like it's enjoyable if he's not,
he adds a lot to it.
Yeah, but what would you say? You said if Ryan Reynolds, if his personality isn't grating to you, is that what you said?
Yeah, if Ryan Reynolds' personality is not a turnoff, you'll be fine.
I think that's the perfect way. Ryan Reynolds is like cilantro. Like either you love it and it makes everything better, or you're like, this tastes
Or
like
tastes
soap.
like soap.
It ruins everything. I can't like you are one way or the other with that guy.
Oh man, it's true.
That's perfect.
It's true. Liz is one of those people that cilantro tastes like soap, so she is. She's lived with that ever since. But it is. I do remember though when Life was getting ready to come out, though people thought it might be a stealth Venom prequel. Because of the fact that we're in space, we're dealing with this unknown alien life form that seems to slowly be taking over the ship. Like, there were genuinely people who thought the twist of Life was going to be that it was a Venom prequel. And people thought that up until it came out. And then obviously it came out and people were kind of like, all right, no, it's just kind of an alien living in that, just in that same kind of, there's been so many Die Hard in a different building type movies. It's just an alien adjacent type thing. And it was not a Venom prequel, folks. Because but at the same time, Sony making a Venom prequel that stars Ryan Reynolds and Jake Gyllenhaal would be the most Sony thing possible.
Sure, yeah,
like,
why not, right?
You put two huge, massive stars that would definitely be a draw to a Venom movie in the secret prequel. But like that idea is so strange to me, where people think movies are like secret versions of things. Like the idea of like a movie being revealed as something else. And I was trying to think,
it's
like,
happened a few times.
It has, and I was like, the one I remember most is the Blair Witch Project sequel.
Yes, it was the Woods.
It was the Woods for the
there
longest
was a trailer,
time.
there was a poster.
It's just the Woods.
There was like a secret screening. I was like, oh, by the way, this is the Blair Witch.
Blair Witch 2. The actual Blair Witch 2. That's the only one I can really think of, though. I can't think of a lot of other movies that like were like, you reveal like later in the marketing or later.
I feel like they
thing.
tried to keep Prometheus a secret at first, and they just couldn't. Like Ridley Scott as aliens, like this. Yeah, I think before the movie came out, we all knew it was a prequel, but I think they tried to not market it that way. But not near.
Prometheus runs a little bit into like what I sort of call the Superman Returns scenario, where like you kind of don't want to acknowledge it, but you're acknowledging it too much, and then you try to backtrack it, but then. Because even when like Prometheus was coming out, people were like, "Oh, so it was an alien prequel," and they were kind of like, they went too far with it, and then they kind of were like, "Oh, we have to temper expectations now because like if you think there's a xenomorph in this movie, there's not really going to be a xenomorph in this movie outside like the NTs." So they kind of were like in that weird space where they were like, we went too hard on the comparisons.
Universe. Yeah,
right. Like it could happen, but
that is such a. There's been times. You could ask me in my life what I thought of the movie. I think Prometheus, masterpiece. Love it. Great suspenseful movie. And other times I'm like, it's kind of a mess. Like, don't waste your time. I've gone back and forth on that movie maybe more than any other movie ever in my life. I'll watch it. I'll sit on it a while. My opinions will change. And I can't quite nail down how I feel about it.
I have always really enjoyed watching Prometheus because I think even everything else aside, it's still a very well-made movie. Like, it's very beautiful settings and scapes and everything. I think all of the production is extremely well done. So
I love
it's got a lot of
I love the look of the movie.
It's got a great cast.
Design, the future technology, and the UI on the ship. It's just so clean. It looks great. I love the look of that movie.
It does. But then I just even saw somebody say it. The whole big thing where they're like, the people in this movie are too dumb. That's the biggest criticism that always happens. Like, if there's a criticism I hear of Prometheus more than any other, it's that the people in this movie are dumb.
They're supposed to be scientists. Why are they so stupid? Yeah.
And like, I don't want to say that's invalid, but that feels very overblown to me because people are like, they're doing really dumb stuff for being so smart. And I was like, it's kind of a tenet / hallmark of science fiction for smart people to do dumb things. Like, the very premise of Frankenstein is a smart man doing something real dumb. By being like, you know what I could do? I could bring a dead body back to life. Like, not just a dead body back to life. I'm going to sew together a dead body and bring it back. Like, it's objectively a terrible idea.
Yeah.
And there's clearly very, like, clear consequences for doing it.
Yeah, I would argue it's pretty dumb to bring dinosaurs back and then, fly a group of people out to go tour the dinosaur facility. And yeah,
Well, and people will say like, "Oh, well, that was a business decision." I'm like, we're still scientists involved that had to make it all happen, and none of them were like, "This is a terrible idea." But Jurassic Park really is just about capitalism, like everything else. But capitalism and tuberculosis—that's what everything's about at the end of the day. But
is it possible to make a film under capitalism that isn't in some way about capitalism? Chew on that one for a while.
I mean, there is no ethical consumption under capitalism, I suppose. So, yeah, I guess not.
We are willing to talk about anything but other than Morbius.
We are really so far from the path. Anyway, Daniel Espinosa. So Life, that is probably the biggest high-profile thing before this he did. I do remember he did Child 44, another film that was Tom Hardy was the leader of that one, based off Tom Rob Smith's 2008 novel of the same name.
Now that's the Venom prequel. That's yes. Eddie Brock before Venom, right?
That's Tom Hardy, Gary Oldman, Noomi Rapace, Joel Kinnaman, Paddy Considine. That movie's stacked, Child 44. He also did a little movie called Safe House in 2012 with Denzel and Ryan Reynolds. Don't know if anyone remembers that one. I actually do remember that one coming out. But that one has Brendan Gleeson in it, and he is one of the greatest actors of all time. So I'm always happy to see him on my screen. But yeah, got tapped for Morbius after Life. I mean, Life was a moderate hit for Sony. I think it made not that much of a hit, but did decently enough that I guess they wanted to keep him in the fold, so they brought him on to Morbius, and a couple of things he's got coming up, but still out there. But what a job to be in charge of arguably the first, like, because the only other two movies that have been released in the Sony's universe of Spider-Man characters are the Venom movies. So this has got to be a weird place to sit where you're making the first movie in that universe that doesn't even have like a tangential tie to Spider-Man. Like, you have to literally make a Morbius movie without Spider-Man, and that's got to be a heck of a thing to take on.
What I mean, you Andrew, you know your comics. We've established that on the show. Morbius isn't a character I'm very familiar with before this movie. I would say I read a lot more DC than Marvel to begin with. Haven't read a lot of Spider-Man. I think the only exposure I had to Morbius was the 90s Spider-Man cartoon. Mm-hmm. And the thing about that cartoon is it's the last cartoon I can think of that still did not depict real guns. They still shoot lasers, like laser beams, because that's less violent, I guess. It's like a holdover from the 80s. And so Morbius, the living vampire, he didn't use his fangs. He didn't bite people on the neck or suck blood. He had like these suckers on his hand that would drain energy. And that was his curse. Like, he would drain life force. Not even like kill people, drain their blood. Like, that was, it was so modified clearly that it wasn't even hard to even call it Morbius. But the design was very much similar to what we get here in this movie. But that's all I knew about Morbius. He was a vampire related to Spider-Man in some way. But how about you? More familiar with the character?
A little bit. I've read Spider-Man when I was reading all comics of all times, and you eventually run into Morbius, whether you like it or not. What you're seeing here is pretty accurate as far as presentation of powers and stuff. He does have psionic abilities that let him like hypnotize other people. And it varies from person to person. That's also supposedly what helps him fly in this movie. He just kind of flies on his own. But he does have the regenerative abilities. He's got the enhanced abilities from that, and he's got his... I don't know if he needs to drink the blood in the comics. I don't remember, because he's the living vampire, because that's the whole thing. He's not actually undead like vampires are. It's... Who knows? I'm not super familiar. I've obviously read comics with Morbius in them, but he's never been one of those characters that I was super stoked about. But most of what we're seeing here is generally in line with what you'd expect.
Well, Andrew, let's talk about it. Let's talk about what we see here, Andrew. Let's talk about this film, Morbius. You ready?
Yes.
Michael Morbius has devoted his life's work to finding a cure for the rare blood disease that has left him crippled. He finally has a breakthrough by combining bat DNA with his own, but as a side effect, he is now a vampire that must feed on human blood. After refusing to give the serum to his friend Milo, who also suffers from the disease, Milo steals the serum and takes it anyway. Now, Morbius must become the monster to stop the monster that he created. That's Morbius, Andrew. That's the bones of it. You know, we got some FBI agents that are on his tail throughout the movie. He's got a doctor at his lab that helps create him, becomes a pseudo love interest later in the movie. But it's the gist of it. He trying to cure himself, makes himself a monster. Friend becomes a monster, has to kill him. That's our story here.
Generally, pretty straightforward origin story. I mean, some might even say to a fault. Just, he's got his condition. Here's how he cures it. Here's what he has to deal with after that. And throughout the course of that, his best friend turns out to be a bad guy, and he has to fight him. The classic. I think Shakespeare wrote a story that was just like this. So,
sure, Andrew.
I'm pretty sure that's what A Tale of Two Cities is about.
Before
it's not by Shakespeare. It's by Dickens, folks. I'm joking.
It's by Garfield. Clearly, it's
yes.
Before we get to the scenes of this movie, Andrew, we're going to talk about the cast. And we're going to start with the best casting and best performance of the film, because every episode, we recognize one person who goes above and beyond the call of duty, that they actually elevate the quality of the entire film with their performance, and we recognize that person by giving them the Mark Strong Award. So, Andrew, go ahead and kick us off here. Who is getting your Mark Strong Award for Morbius?
I got to go with, I love my villains. I got to go with the villain of our piece, revealed very late into the proceedings. Matt Smith playing Lucian / Milo Morbius.
Do you think early, the first scene in this movie, just about, you find out his name's Lucian, but Morbius just insists on calling him Milo, so much so that it becomes his name. So no one ever calls him his real name anymore. Other characters call him Milo. Do you think it's because, if he was Lucian, we would know he was the villain from the very beginning? You can't be named Lucian and not end up the villain of the movie.
I guess. I guess. He is playing an interesting kind of hybrid character. He was originally announced as playing a version of Hunger, who's based off a character name. I don't even know how to say his name. It's Loxias. Loxius?
Sure.
Loxus? I don't know. Loxus Crown, who plays a character named Hunger, who's typically a Spider-Man Blade, but he is also a Morbius villain. So there's pieces of that in this character. There are also a couple of other things at play here, including even just taking some inspiration from Michael Morbius himself. But he is very sickly throughout the first half of this movie, very similar to Jared Leto. But eventually does basically steals Michael's serum and gives it to himself. And gains the same power set. And we see how wildly different these two people who grew up in the same situations take this. And Matt Smith's performance just radically changes once he gets the powers. And, I've used the phrase understands the assignment. I think he absolutely does. He knows he's in a movie about two dudes that suddenly gain vampire powers. And he's just going for it pretty much nonstop the entire rest of the rest of this movie. Once he gets those powers, he's hamming it up. He's enjoying it. There's a whole dance sequence that's been memed to oblivion where he's dancing in front of the mirrors. That's where you kind of start getting some Spider-Man vibes there. But he is basically just going for it. I've heard people say it's like he's acting in a Monty Python sketch, and none of that seems out of place for me. I think this dude really is just going for it at that point. And it adds a huge injection of personality into what could be just a very bland character, and creates some very memorable scenes that otherwise could have just been very bare bones. And in that regard, I think he's bringing up the movie. He's making the whole movie better with this performance. So I have to go with Matt Smith, an alum of the show, obviously, from our Terminator Genesis episode. Bringing it here as Lucian / Milo Morbius.
Yes, alum of the show. We talked about it then, and I'm gonna say it again now. Matt Smith, weird looking dude. He just looks. They just made him differently, Andrew, and he can play like the frail, sickly guy pretty well, and then he can be the unnerving villain. He's got the face for both. And you know what, Andrew? Matt Smith is also getting my Mark Strong award. Easily the highlight of the movie, in my opinion. There's, the scenes where I am having fun watching this movie, it is because of Matt Smith. I like when the script finally gives him a chance to kind of become unhinged a little bit, ham it up. We're all the better for it. I wish more people in this movie were on his level. You talk about understanding the assignment. Like, I'm not going to say other people misunderstood anything. I wish they were on this wavelength. I think we could have got a little bit more out of it. But Matt Smith is certainly there. He's delivering the goods. I'm having fun watching him. There's I'm trying not to turn everything into backhanded. There's parts of this movie where I'm not having fun, but the ones I am, it's always because of him.
Yeah, I agree completely. I think he, like you said, I don't want to say that nobody else is giving it their all here, but he is going hard, way harder than he ever needed to. And like I said, the movie is all the better for it. And like you said, I'm having a good time when he's on the screen.
Now, Andrew, this is a movie that, from jump, we knew it would qualify for our show. People have asked us about it. I can't remember if we were still only doing comic movies at the time or for something we have to go back and do. But it was kind of a given. We're going to have to get to it eventually. I wasn't dying to cover it for reasons we've already talked about. But another reason is because it stars Jared Leto as the titular character, as Michael Morbius. And look, #PP, I'm not a particular fan of Jared Leto. I think we are one breaking news story away from him, from us not speaking about him on the microphone. Yeah, from him disappearing, from whatever term you want to use. There's enough stories out there that I'm not into it. Strictly talking about, acting and performance, he's certainly given some performances that I like. Requiem for a Dream, probably the first thing I saw him in, that or Fight Club, and a great performance. It feels weird to say I enjoy that movie. I used to watch it a lot.
Yeah.
That's one of those, there's movies that they're on a list of I'll probably never watch that again. Requiem for a Dream is on there. I used to watch that once a month in high school. They used to be it was in my little library of movies, and I watched it. I didn't glorify the drug use or anything, but yeah, this is, I was getting into film and cinema. I was like, this is really good, gritty film. You're just leaning farther and farther back in a chair. I watched that movie a lot, and then, like I said, now it's, I don't know. I think it's something about the more life experience you get, the more you relate to things differently, and they are more likely to hit a raw nerve based on some of your experiences, maybe. And that's just one that I feel like would just hit me too deep. I was, Train Spotting is another one. I think listening to Blank Check podcast the other day. I listened to their episode on Train Spotting. It's yeah, that's another one I saw multiple times, in high school and shortly afterwards. I don't think I'll ever watch it again. I don't think I ever want to feel that way again.
No. I don't know why you wanted to feel that way at the time.
They're good movies.
They're very good. I think we've talked about that before, that just as you grow, your relationship with media changes. And it's actually interesting to kind of look at that as, movies that your enjoyment has stayed consistent, where you enjoy a movie now just as much as you did the first time you saw it. But also your interactions with it are very different. I've talked about how something like Superman, the movie, the distant family stuff, hits me way harder now than it did before. Because my family is distant now. And the idea that something could happen and I wouldn't, I don't have any powers, and I wouldn't be there. That's the sort of stuff that like hits, and I'm just like, oh no. Marlon Brando may be phoning it in, but it's hitting. But he may be reading off the cue cards, but they're good cue cards. And so it's interesting as our kind of relationship with things change. And there's movies I know I loved as a kid that I don't love now. There's movies that I love now that I know I watched before and I didn't. So it's interesting as we grow and change our relationship with the media, we have digested all changes. I do like to think about the things that the enjoyment is consistent. And that's always fun. Like Clue. Clue is a movie that I love today just as much as I did the first time I saw it.
It was a good one. Ninja Turtles, original Ninja Turtles.
The OG. Yeah. Batman 89, another one. I still love that movie as much as I did when I watched it. There's all sorts of stuff that's like that. Like, you know, people think that like it all changes. Nah, not really. Clue, like Groundhog Day, another one, Ghostbusters. Like, these are movies that like I love now just as much as I did at the time. And it's always fun to go back and be like, cool, we're still good. Nothing's changed here. You know, I've not suddenly gotten super paranoid about comedy murder mysteries. But yeah, I can't say Requiem for a Dream was ever a movie that I would have watched once a month, Chris. Getting back to the point.
I had the DVD and it had like had an insert that like folded out, kind of like a poster, but it wasn't a poster, but it's kind of hard to explain. Anyway, it folded out to a poster size, and I had it on my wall, amongst other things. I had Requiem for a Dream art. I was thinking about that the other day. I'm like, that's kind of a weird thing, I guess, to have on my wall, but I had a lot of DVD
there,
art
Chris. I mean, yeah, but there was a time where my walls were just covered in posters. You couldn't even see the walls. There were so many posters. And nothing has changed. Yeah, I gotta say though, I feel very similarly about Jared Leto. Like, there's just something about him, and when like he's said plenty of weird things, there's been plenty of stories about him. Like you said, we're kind of just like, by many indications, I think there's already been plenty that some people would kind of be done with him, and I think you're very justified if you are done with him. Like you said, like you said, though, one more thing is I think all it's going to take. But I remember all the stories we heard about him, like on the Suicide Squad set, and I know people were talking about how like some of that was just like made up for the media to make the movie seem like so weird and kooky, but like it just was a complete total turn off to me, where I was just like, man, I don't want to watch this.
Hashtag
like I don't
PV.
care. Like, well, the descriptions of his behavior, like it very much was just like, this doesn't make, you know, I don't want to go see the movie now because Jared Leto's Joker is so crazy. He was sending like dead animal parts to his co-stars. Like, that just makes me think the man is insane and that he needs help. Like, that endless method acting thing where it's like, just be normal. Just be normal.
You know what I find funny about method acting? Just go a little tangent here. It's always presented like it is the height of artistry and craft and passion, and I'm so devoted. But if you think about it, if you have to do all this stuff to get a performance, you're not as good of an actor as someone who doesn't have to do that, right? Like, I'm more impressed by the person that can turn it on, turn in a great performance, and then go home and be normal. with their family.
No, there's I don't know, did I mention the William Friedkin story about Tommy Lee Jones on the podcast before?
I don't think so.
Anyway, so another brief tangent here, but somebody asked William Friedkin about, like, you know, actors he liked working with, and he very notably did not enjoy working with Al Pacino on Cruisin', although Cruisin' was kind of seen as bad from a lot of angles. But he worked with Tommy Lee Jones on 2 different movies later in his career, and he mentioned that he loved working with Tommy Lee Jones because Tommy Lee Jones would like come to set and he'd be like, "So William, what's the deal?" And William would be like, "All right, you're going to come through the door. You're going to come over and talk to her. You're going to go over there. You're going to think a little bit. You're going to walk over here. Then you're going to walk back to her and go back out the door." And Tommy Lee Jones would be like, "Okay, so I'm going to come in through the door. I'm going to talk to her. I'm going to go over there. I'm going to think for a little bit. I'm going to walk over here. I'm going to walk back to her, say something, and go out the door. Got it." And he'd tell the guy to mark all the spots on the floor, and he would be like, "All right, let's go." And he's like, "That's what working with Tommy Lee Jones is like." He's like, every time he gets exactly what I want him to do. You know, I know Tommy Lee Jones is one of those people that are like, he's been playing the same character for 20 years, but go watch No Country for Old Men, guys. Tommy Lee Jones can be pretty great. But then also in that movie is Benicio del Toro, and he's like, but working with Benicio del Toro, he would be like, "Why do I have to come in through the door?" And William Friedkin's like, oh my God. Like Benicio del Toro, like, maybe my character's like, maybe they find him lying on the floor. And he's like, what did my character do when he was 12? And William Friedkin's like, I don't know. Like,
what's my motivation for using a door?
And he's like, I have no idea what's going on here. And he's like, but he mentioned he made a movie with Nick Nolte once. I forget which one it was, but what Nick Nolte did at the time apparently was he would write like a 300-page book about his character and give it to the directors to read. Like, not just wrote it for himself, would give it to the director and be like, I need you to understand my character's motivations. And William Friedkin's like, so he gives me this, and it's just terrible. He's like, it's some of the worst stuff I've ever read. He's like, I made it through a few pages and I threw it in the trash. And he's like, so he comes to set the next day, and Nick Nolte walks up and he's like, cool, did you read what I gave you? And William Friedkin's like, yeah, great stuff. So you're going to come in through the door, and like just talks about how he has to like, how you have to like do these weird things for these actors that like get so deep into their own heads that they almost can't move without you having to basically like, and he's just talking about, he's like, you'd have to make stuff up like on the spot to get some of these people to actually know what they need to do. But like you said, it's interesting because like, if you read this script and we've laid out the scene and your thought is, what did my character do when he was 12? I can't do anything else until I know what he did when he was 12. Maybe you're bad at your job. I'm not trying to be rude, but and method acting is almost always used exclusively in the circles that I've seen. It's like when people are justified being like really awful on a set or like being really 100%. Mean to people because they're like, I was in character, and in character I had to be really mean to everybody. It's like, or you could just not, like you could just not do that. And it's always so weird because, like I said, almost exclusively method actors are people that you've heard a story about how difficult they are on set, and I'm just like, where there's smoke, there's fire, guys. Come on, just be normal. I've normal actors.
I've heard Samuel L. Jackson is, like you were saying about Tommy Lee Jones, just total professional, knows his lines. He's gonna show up. He's gonna hit his marks. He has little patience for you if you're not up to his level, but he just shows up and does the job, and I like that. It's a job. At the end of the day, let's not lose. Let me just talk to all the A-list celebrity. It's not a
all of you that are listening.
Let's not lose sight of this, guys. Come on.
Ironically enough, he must have had a blast with this. William Friedkin made Rules of Engagement in 2000, and it's Tommy Lee Jones and Samuel L. Jackson. So I'm sure he shot that movie in like 8 days. But also in that movie, Guy Pearce and Bruce Greenwood. So apparently it's the greatest movie of all time, and I need to go watch it. But yeah, I was watching a lot of William Friedkin interviews after he passed, and like rewatching stuff like Sorcerer, and like, man, he really just had no F's to give about anything. Like, he really, like, people were like, what do you think about Al Pacino? He's like, I'll tell you exactly what I think about Al Pacino, and then roasted the dude. And it was like, this dude does not care that he's Al Pacino. He's got no qualms whatsoever. And, I don't know. I'm sure it's two different sides of a story thing where you've got fault on both sides. But in a way, I was like, I can't help but respect that, like, because Al Pacino's that guy that, like, people are just like, almost everybody would like trip over themselves to not say anything bad about Al Pacino because he's Al Pacino. But William Friedkin's like, well, I'm William Friedkin, so I can. Like, and I was like, okay, I'm into it. You did make The Exorcist, man, and that rules. So
using her privilege for good. I like it.
Exactly.
Anything to say about Jared Leto in this movie?
He is playing Michael Morbius, the titular character. That's really rude and snarky, folks. I apologize. No, he's playing like, he's playing it pretty straightforward. It's actually an interesting performance because, like, a lot of the things you kind of know him for, like whether it's Suicide Squad or like Blade Runner or Dallas Buyers Club or even things like Requiem for a Dream, there's this kind of like either like cold, calculating energy or this like manic energy. Like with this one, there's like none of that. Like, it's a very passive performance by Jared Leto standards, and it's kind of interesting watching him do that, where he's kind of purposely like, I don't know if he's toning it down or if he's just choosing to do this. Like, I really don't know. But I was kind of surprised the first time I watched it by just how kind of normal his performance is. Like, he plays it pretty straightforward, and there's not a whole lot of layers here. Yeah.
Jared Leto's energy is charismatic creep. That is his pocket. right? That's all his best performances. I mean, going back to even Requiem for a Dream. I mean, he's a junkie, and he's not the most put together person, right? Or I saw him a few years ago, and I think it's called All the Small Things, the Small Things,
The Little Things.
The Little Things. Yeah, with Denzel Washington.
The movie that was basically Seven, yeah.
Yeah. Not a great movie, #PP, but he is the person they suspect is the serial killer the whole time because he has like unwashed hair and he just has an unnerving presence about him. That's Jared Leto. That's his energy. #PP, I think there's a reason he gives off that energy so well, but when you're using him like that, you're using him to the best of his abilities. And here, there's the part where he, like when he first takes the serum and he starts getting like real like twitchy, and I was like, oh, Jared Leto's loving this. He's loving like acting bizarre and having these quirks and shaking his head. Like this is the stuff that like he gets into, and that was kind of the most I could see him like leaning into it. Other than that, I would agree with you. He's kind of playing it straightforward. He's saying his good guy quips, and it's weird because it's Jared Leto. #PP, I'm sorry, but that is my take on him, and we can move on to the next person.
There was something I wanted to point out about something. Oh, one of the things I literally just saw him in was the Haunted Mansion movie. Because he's in the Haunted Mansion movie.
Okay.
He plays the Hatbox Ghost, who, if you know what the Hatbox Ghost looks like, he's a skeleton face that wears a top hat and carries around a hat box. Here's the thing about it. At no moment in that movie did I know it was Jared Leto until they flashed back and showed the character when he was alive. It was one of those things where I thought it was very strange because I'm like, you could have literally put anybody in this role and it would have not changed the movie. And I don't think Jared Leto being the Hatbox Ghost like drew more people to the movie. It's one of those strange castings, kind of like this, where it's like, I guess you cast him to do the weird thing, but he's almost all CG. And like all the flashbacks where you see him when he's alive are like dubbed. They're narrated. There's not really anything there. It was another one where I was just kind of like, you could have used anybody here. Why'd you go with him? #PP. Dude's weird.
Adria Arjona plays Dr. Martine Bancroft. She's the doctor that reluctantly helps Morbius with his serum and continues to aid him as he, I won't say gets framed, but he's the suspect in a lot of killings, and she believes he's innocent and helps him along the way. He ends up paying a high price for it. And then, as I mentioned, they kind of have like a romantic thing budding. She is... I promise I'm not trying to sound backhanded to every single person I talk about, but I think she is trying with what she is given. There's not really a lot to it, but she's often acting against either nothing or there's maybe Jared Leto's on set, but there's a lot of stuff that's going to be changing in the final shot, and she just it's a tall ask, but I think she's up for it. It would seem that she has a multi-picture deal because she's believed to be dead, but looks like she might be another vampire by the end of this movie. So we'll, I don't know, maybe see where that goes, Andrew.
We will. This is a character from the comics who has definitely ebbed in and out of being a vampire and dying and coming back. So notably known as the assistant to Michael Morbius, trying to help him cure him. So this is another thing that is, to be fair, coming from the comics. I remember her from a few different things. She was in Pacific Rim Uprising, which was the kind of almost forgotten sequel to Pacific Rim. The Belko Experiment, which I remember coming out, felt like that was kind of a big deal. That was a James Gunn written kind of battle royale in an office building type thing. She was just recently in Andor as well, played Bix Kelleen. And even getting in on that Fortnite action. So she's got a little bit of everything to her credit. But yeah, trying to like really pile on the empathy and everything for Michael's situation and trying to push him to kind of figure out this cure, see what he can do. And just stays by his side pretty much the whole time. She doesn't want to give up on him. And yeah, I like what she's doing here, and there's definitely some room down the line if that's something they wanted to revisit.
Jared Harris plays Dr. Emil Nicholas, who kind of looks after Morbius and Milo as they grow up. Seems to be their almost caretaker, especially Milo. and I would say is the heart of the movie. I kind of wish there was more of his character, because I think he really shines in the moments that he does get. Clearly cares very deeply for the two of them, and effective performance. Like I said, I just wish we had more of it.
Yeah, I like Jared Harris a lot. I've seen him in, a bunch of stuff over the years. He has a bit part in Natural Born Killers back in the 90s, but then out throughout the 90s and 2000s. He was in that Lost in Space reboot in 98. He played the older Will Robinson. He was in Ocean's 12. He was in some of the Resident Evil movies. He was in Curious Case of Benjamin Button. He then showed up in that Robert Downey Jr. Sherlock Holmes sequel as Professor James Moriarty. Played Ulysses S. Grant in Steven Spielberg's Lincoln. Like, dude's been all over the place doing everything there is to do. Was also in The Man from U.N.C.L.E., the television reboot by Guy Ritchie, which is fantastic, and all of you should watch it. And Army Hammer's in it, so if you don't want to watch it because of that, I get it. And even television, I remember him from Fringe, a show that I liked quite a bit. And then even recently, he was jumping in the Foundation television series loosely based off the same series of novels by Isaac Asimov, one of my favorite writers. So Jared Harris is great.
He's working.
I think he's working, and I think he's a fantastic actor. Great character actor. I think adds a tremendous gravitas to everything he's in. And he is actually the son of Richard Harris, known by most people as the original Albus Dumbledore from the Harry Potter films. Passed away after they made the second one and was replaced by Michael Gambon going forward. But Jared Harris, it's so weird to me because Jared Harris is in like his 60s, and it's weird to think that his dad was Richard Harris, but his dad would have been in his 90s now. So it makes perfect sense age-wise but you see an old man, that's the son of another old man, and your brain just can't reconcile it. But so I remember him being cast in this movie, and I was like, oh, that's going to be pretty cool. And he is again playing a character from the comics that is basically the first victim of Morbius's bloodlust after he changes. So he's not a long-standing character, but then eventually, again, himself got turned into a vampire. So everybody that Morbius knows basically gets turned into a vampire at some point. So this is another character that you possibly could go somewhere with in the future. I doubt it. So Milo killing him is reminiscent of Michael killing him in the original comics. And just what a mean thing for Milo to do. Like, this dude so literally mean. Waited on you hand and foot for decades. And all because he said, don't kill some people. You got to kill the man. It's just not, it's not cool, Milo. It's not cool. But I do love Jared Harris. I love seeing him and stuff. I think he's a great actor. I think he's a great, tremendous asset to everything he's in. Had he been here more, I think he absolutely would have been the running for Mark Strong. I think the scenes he has, especially when he gets a chance to kind of dig into some dialogue, I think he really, like you said, he kind of acts as that kind of heart of the movie by being this kind of link between the characters beyond themselves. This one who kind of been guiding them from the beginning, kind of encouraged them, especially Michael, to kind of reach his potential despite his condition. And yeah, it's good stuff. Like I said, if he'd had more screen time, I absolutely could have seen this being in the running for Mark Strong. And like I said, I'm never going to be sad to see Jared Harris on my screen.
And lastly, in our cast, we have Al Madrigal playing Al Rodriguez and Tyrese Gibson as Simon Stroud. They're a pair of FBI agents that are on the case, trying to figure out who is draining all this blood, who's leaving these bloodless bodies around. They're hot on the tail of Michael Morbius, and kind of let him go in the end. It's a weird relationship they have going on there, but I think they're intended to be the comedic relief of the movie, especially Al. He is very quick to just kind of be on board. Like, all right, we're chasing a vampire. He carries holy water with him because just in case, not taking any chances. And he, definitely the comic relief to Tyrese Gibson's straight man. He doesn't crack a smile pretty much the whole movie. So play off each other pretty well.
Gibson is playing a guy named Simon Stroud, who again is from the comics. He is a mercenary in the comics trained by the CIA, so we're switching that up here. They definitely hint that he's got like a cybernetic arm or something like that, but we never actually really see it. They kind of don't really dive into that very much. But he is a character that's worked alongside Spider-Man and Black Widow and eventually has interactions with Morbius. So again, something else from the comics that is getting pulled in here. Obviously, we're changing it up, making him an FBI agent instead. But definitely here, Al Madrigal's character, near as I can tell, not based off anybody that you would know. But definitely doing your classic, not really good cop, bad cop, but like funny cop, stoic cop. Like just, Al Madrigal is the one cracking the jokes the whole time. I mean, he's, I've seen him on The Daily Show. I've seen him in a bunch of different places. And then Tyrese Gibson is Tyrese Gibson, just kind of doing his thing. A little different, because in like Fast and the Furious, he's definitely like the butt of jokes and like quipping and things like that. Not really doing that here. Kind of more stoic. And definitely kind of less willing, at least in the immediate, to kind of let Michael Morbius walk. And that's some pretty strong indications that he is the guy responsible for some of this stuff. So they are definitely Al Madrigal especially is adding that comedic tone to the movie, because it's a pretty straightforward, serious movie. There's not a whole lot of humor to be had. And Al Madrigal's character is injecting as much of that as possible.
And that's pretty much it on our main players. A pretty narrow scope on the cast. So, Andrew, it's time to move on to the scenes of this movie. And we're going to start with our personal favorite scene, best scene of the movie. Go ahead and kick us off here, Andrew. When is Morbius firing on all cylinders? What would you say is the best scene in the film?
I'm going to go straight to our pseudo climax of the film, where we got our final kind of, after teasing it and doing a few run-ins, we finally get it. It's Morbius v. Morbius, Dawn of Vampires. And it's basically Jared Leto kind of embracing his powers, embracing his status as kind of this weird living vampire, and knowing that he has to stop Milo, because if he doesn't, the man's going to basically run a roughshod over the entire city, let alone the world. So we basically have them fully leaning into all the powers they're using here. The flying, the everything, and throughout the course of this, Michael has developed what he believes is an antibody to stop Milo, but he is fairly certain that it is also going to kill him. But he also plans to use it on himself. So he basically wants to end this right at the source, not really open this up to being any ongoing thing. How Canadian of you. But it's decent fight. Like, obviously we're heavy on the CG at this point. We've got our full, like, he's got the classic Morbius comics face now, the kind of shrunken in skin with the vampire teeth and everything. They're really leaning into all of that. Jumping around on the top of buildings and city stuff. I think it's pretty cool. And ultimately results in Michael overcoming Milo, being able to stop him after he calls to his bat friends. Does the old Ace Ventura, come to me, my jungle friend? Restrains him, and ultimately is able to overcome him. And there's a brief moment where he kind of, Milo kind of maybe has some remorse for what he's done, but also Michael realizes he had no real choice here. Milo had kind of gotten his taste of power and was never going to let it go, and was potentially going to hurt people in the process. So,
I mean, good pick, Andrew. Definitely, as far as action scenes go, I'd say it is the highlight. We got the big final fight, sort of underground cavern subway-esque station they end up fighting in, and yeah, so Morbius summons these bats. And it's very Batman-esque. I mean, being surrounded, very Batman Begins imagery with him being surrounded by the bats. And then Milo takes, he goes for the killing blow. He jumps across the room. It's in slow motion. He's gonna stab him. And to fight back, Morbius does what I can only describe as, and this is literally the last note I took about this movie. It's 2 words: Bat Hadouken. He gathers all the bats and thrusts them forward with his palms and sends bats flying at Milo. And that is what gives him the chance to finally come up and stab him in the heart. And you could have asked me 50 different guesses on how I thought this movie was going to end. I don't think everyone would have got to Bat Hadouken, but if nothing else, it is a wild visual. I think the bats look great. I think it's a cool visual of him being surrounded by this swarm of bats. After the fight, he flies out of the sewer with all the bats. Pretty cool. Final, fully formed Morbius. But I liked them kind of looping back and finding a way to use bats in this final fight.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the, embrace the bats, but don't call him Batman.
And
did they make a Batman joke in this movie? I don't remember.
I don't think they did. Although the score, I think I texted you this. The score is quite reminiscent of The Dark Knight. I don't know if it was just me, but there were definitely times that I was getting those vibes, and I gotta think there's, consciously or not, there's some influence there. But no, I think we just get the Venom joke that was in the trailer for 28 years. He calls himself Venom because got established in the same universe. Andrew,
Exactly.
in this movie, he has created an artificial blood, and it's blue. It's like this pastel blue color, and it unlocked this memory for me. I'll just say it. I was told when I was younger that your blood is blue. Blood is actually blue. When it's oxygen, it turns red. It's like if anytime you have a cut, it comes out red, because you'll never see it as blue because it's touching the air as it comes out. So when it's pumped like from your lungs, it's nice and red, but by the time it's going back, it's blue. And I was like, oh, well, maybe that's literally a year 2023. I'm watching this. I'm like, oh, maybe that's why the artificial blood is blue. And I thought about it because it's something I haven't thought about in a long time. And I Googled it, and basically the first response was like, no, your blood is red. Like, let's clear this up.
Yeah.
Blood is red. There's a shade of red. Like, oxygen affects its shade. But the reason you look at your skin and see blue veins is just an optical illusion from the light refracting through your skin, whatever. And I don't even know if that's where the myth that your blood is blue came from. I think, like, literally my parents told me that. And I don't know if this is something that is widespread, if it's just me being a dumb kid or dumb family. I don't know. But, like, I feel like I believed this for most of my life and didn't definitively know until today Googling it that your blood is in fact always red.
All right. I knew it was red long before this, but like I definitely also heard your blood is blue until it touches oxygen. But like what I heard is that meant that like some of the blood in your body was blue, but some of it was red because like some of it obviously like you breathe, it gets exposed to oxygen. But that meant that like before it hit oxygen in your body, it was blue. And it's like, no, it's not, the air doesn't magically change the color of your blood. But I think the blue veins, the bluish veins on your skin are absolutely what leads to that. I think that's absolutely why that became a thing. And maybe before the age of science, it was a thing that it's probably one of those things somebody went, my veins look blue. I wonder if my blood's blue. And somebody just ran with it. Like, it was just like, oh, your veins are blue, so your blood must be blue. It's like, no, human body's a freaky thing. And your skin changes the color of stuff because your skin is technically a layer of things. I don't like thinking about my skin, Chris. It freaks me out. The function of skin.
Your skin freaks you out?
Just the notion of what skin is and what it's covering freaks me out.
What it's covering is freaky. I'll give you that one. To me, it's the heart that freaks me out. If a movie has they kind of do it here, but it's not super realistic. It has a beating heart over the soundtrack really loud. After a few seconds, like I get lightheaded. I feel like I'm gonna pass out. It Chapter 2 during the finale, they're gonna stab his heart, I think, or something. I haven't seen it since theaters, but I was in the theater like squirming in my seat, like about to cover my ears because the droning of that heartbeat. And I think it freaks me out because, Andrew, your heart has been beating nonstop for longer than you've quote unquote been alive. Since before you've been born, your heart started beating. and it's never stopped. You can think of any memory that you have, your heart was beating during that time, and it's still beating. No rest for your heart. That freaks me out. It doesn't feel like something should be able to do that nonstop. And I feel like when I think about it, like my heart just gonna like be like, I've had enough and just stop. So,
well, Chris, I'm gonna make my joke first.
Okay.
And my joke was, do you have a dead person buried under your house? Because that would explain why the sound of a heartbeat is very unnerving to you. Secondly, I do not appreciate the existential crisis. I was not prepared. So I'm going to need you to shut up. No, I mean, we could go one step further. Like, we don't technically know what existence even is. We don't actually know what the universe is or what it is around us. We perceive as we perceive it. But do I perceive the universe the same way that you do? No. That's actually the part that really freaks me out. It's like I see the universe around me as a certain thing. Not everybody else sees it exactly the same way. Like, the shades of colors are different. The just slight things of perception are different to other people. And it means that nobody is actually seeing the world the same way as somebody else. And you throw into the fact that we don't really know what existence is. You throw that on top of the fact that I'm basically just a giant flesh mech being driven by electrical impulses and a giant wad of fat in my skull. And Chris, I don't want to think about this anymore.
I was surprised that Michael Morbius turned into a vampire, like, right away.
Beautiful. What a segue.
Like, as soon as he gets the serum, like, the lights go out, they come down to investigate, they walk in the room because he's disappeared, and he's on the ceiling, and he's got vampire face, and he goes on a killing spree. I thought for sure we would be like, the false, he's been cured, like, it works like normal, and we slowly reveal he has a thirst for blood or whatever, but they jump right in. They get that first kind of action scene on a boat, which yeah, I guess other than finale, it's probably my favorite action scene in the movie. It's taking these guys out one by one. It's kind of you could kind of put that scene in like any vampire movie, and it plays about the
classic.
same, you know?
Yeah, just the classic unknown assailant. Although we know who it is, just because, you gotta.
Is the name of the movie? Yeah,
Yeah, it's in the name.
That Dracula on a boat movie looks pretty wild. Speaking of vampire on a boat.
I've heard some people. There's a writer I like. His name is Joe R. Lansdale. He liked it quite a bit. I haven't gotten around to it. It's based off like a single chapter of Dracula, which I think is like, when you say it like that, it sounds ridiculous. But that single chapter of Dracula is about Dracula being shipped from Romania to England.
That's a pretty cool idea.
And there's definitely a story there. Like, it's definitely something where there's a whole lot of story in between those pages. And so, and again, Dracula looks like a cool creature. He doesn't look like Bela Lugosi's Dracula is iconic. He's classic. I'm not going to say it's not, but like, I do something with it, to have some fun with it. And I'm into Dracula just being like this gnarly creature. So I actually do. It's The Last Voyage of the Demeter. I do want to check that out. Maybe I'll do that as a double feature with The Meg 2, a film by Ben Wheatley.
I'm sure those go well together.
Yeah.
Andrew, we've been talking about Morbius for a minute now. There's not scenes up and down this movie that I want to dive into and sing the praises of, and I don't want to tear this movie apart. Like, our podcast, we know what kind of movies we're covering, but we could sit here and try to tear stuff apart for hours, but plenty of people are already doing that. You want something that tears Morbius apart? I'm sure there's a YouTube video out there for you, but to me, it's like, this is some of it we talked about even before we hit record, just the weird thing that is the Sony universe of Spider-Man characters without Spider-Man, and I know they've shortened it since then, but it's just a weird thing to attempt, and it's kind of working in the sense that the movies have by and large made money, and there was only 3 of them. This one, not a huge hit, it's got the COVID thing of it, but they seem to be just moving forward with them. And it's weird. And I wasn't hyped for this movie when it came out, so why didn't see it? Nothing could have prepared me for what I would actually get watching it. I don't find a lot of substance there within it. To me, it's all about Matt Smith. You know what? I didn't even say my favorite scene. We've gotten so far off on these vampire tangents. But what I wanted to highlight as my favorite scene was actually, I like zooming in on those little moments. It's whenever Matt Smith, his character, when Milo gets the superpowers, and he's just, like my note says, Matt Smith is feeling himself. That's my favorite. He's just alone in his apartment, shirtless, checking out his new body, and dancing this really like dorky, awkward dance. But he thinks it's cool. I like this a lot, genuinely. And to me, it's like, I think my note said, like, this is probably how someone with a lifelong disability would act if they were healed overnight. Right? They wouldn't be like, oh, my body works. Let me walk to the fridge, grab a snack like a normal person. No, they're going to like dance. It probably won't be the best dance because they're a white guy named Matt Smith, or because they've never been able to use their body like that before.
Easy.
It would probably be just really just dorky, just like elation that you can even do the simplest things. It reminds me of like a nerd becoming cool overnight. I mean, we can go back to Spider-Man 3 again. Like, the reason that dance is so silly and awkward is because it's nerdy Peter Parker's idea of what a cool guy is like,
yeah.
So that's kind of like what this dance is, and I think it's the moment in the movie I'm having the most fun, and I think in addition to just being really fun to watch, makes a lot of sense for the character. So I did want to highlight that as my favorite scene.
Yeah, I agree. This is the moment when I watched it the first time where I was like, he gets it. This dude knows what he's doing. This dude knows the movie he signed up for. And he's just having a blast with it. He's got no questions. He's got no qualms. He's leaning into it at this point, and he's hamming it up. This is the moment where I was like, this is a Monty Python sketch. Like, this is exactly what it's going for. This absurd energy, played straight on the outside to a degree. But like you said, he's kind of this child that's not just been healed, is literally like peak physical performance. Like, he's not just like no longer sickly. He's like shredded and like has these superpowers. And so like he's leaning into it and kind of going to town and like doing dumb things out in the town because he can now. And like, he doesn't have to worry about it because he can fight anyone. And it's wild. But this moment is definitely where I was watching the movie and I was like, all right, he gets it. This dude knows exactly what kind of movie he's in. Maybe not the same movie as everybody else, but it's working for me.
Andrew, any last thoughts on Morbius? Any other scene you want to jump into?
The scene where he says, leave all the sciencey stuff and the spicy Cheetos. I breathed a little bit harder.
It's pretty good. Spicy Cheetos are good. Flamin' hot Cheetos. I mean, that's
It was it's just such a weird thing because I can't imagine Jared Leto actually eating spicy Cheetos. Like,
no, or Morbius for that matter. Doesn't he?
Or Morbius. Like, now? I thought you needed blood, man. Also, I gotta say this. #PP. Every time he like guzzled one of those things of artificial blood, it really just looked like he was eating one of those like applesauce packet squeeze things. Just like every time, because he'd like grab it and would like hold it up and like squeeze it in, and I'm just like, is this just yogurt? Like, what is this? Like, it just didn't. It looked. I realize it's something that you want to portray visually in the film, but there's this series on TikTok I watch sometime, and it's this guy that's like things you can't look tough doing. And it's like, it's ridiculous stuff. Like when you're like trying to get out of the back seat of a 2-door car, like there's no way to like lean that seat forward and get out and negotiate your way out of the car and look cool while doing it. This is like that scene where like, there's no cool way to like drink an IV of artificial blood, which is very narrowly specific. I understand, but like he does it a lot. This movie has him do it repeatedly. And, it just, every time I was like, is this Gogurt? Like, what actually is this? Are you getting to actually drink something? I don't understand.
Like on set, like what is he actually drinking? You mean?
Yeah, like is it like I don't know. Every time I watched it, I was like, well, I'm gonna go get some yogurt after this, that's for sure. But yeah, it was just like such a weird visual for the movie. And they do some interesting effects. I don't know that they quite all worked for me. Because they wanted to make his powers look interesting, I guess. So they wanted there to be like, so he does like these like weird Nightcrawler ripple lines every time he's like doing anything. And like when he does the echolocation thing, they try to make the world look a little bit different. And I at least appreciated trying to introduce a different visual style. Because, the idea of like, oh, you've got super strength and, enhanced durability, like it's a very common standard power set. And I at least appreciated that we were trying to add this this visual layer to it, even if I don't know if it was quite all effective. Similar to like Hulk. Like that comic panel transition, I don't know that it really worked for me, but there's at least an ambition there that I have to appreciate. And that sounds really backhanded, but I just appreciate that we're thinking about the movie that way. We're trying to be like, okay, we've got this thing. We've got it. It'd be easy to just not distinguish this, but trying to add some visual flair and trying to give the movie at least a slight visual identity beyond, and he punched that dude really far.
Thus closes the chapter of the book, Andrew, Comic Book Month. We are once again saying goodbye to comic book movies. We covered them for a long time. It was fun to revisit them for this month, catch up on a few we missed, catch up on some of the newer ones, and now it's going to be back out to the vast sea of film beyond the comic books. But it was a good time. I'm sure we'll be back again. Yeah, we got to talk some more comic book movies in the future.
Absolutely. I think there's absolutely no way that we won't eventually be back to some more comic book movies. They keep making them. They're not all going to be hits to the fans, and we'll be there ready to tell you what's actually good about it.
We're moving into September. New month means a new theme, a new category of film. All through the month of September, we will be talking about Mars. Every movie in the month of September will be a movie based around the concept of Mars in some way that was poorly received upon release. Believe it or not, there's a lot of Mars movies out there, Andrew. We're able to fill a whole month with it. But we're kicking off with a bang, with a movie I'm very excited to revisit because I haven't watched it in a long time. I know a lot of people hold this movie very dearly. Next week, we are talking Mars Attacks. It's got a cult following. It's big director. It's Tim Burton. A bit of a weird reception upon release. We'll better dive into it, and then of course dive into everything that works in that movie, everything we like about it, the positives of Mars Attacks. Andrew, you excited for this next month?
I am. What I actually find is interesting about this, Chris, is these movies are all released within 5 years of each other. We won't tell you what all four of them are at the head time, but they are all released within 5 years of each other, which means that despite what Disney executives thought about John Carter and not calling it Of Mars, there was definitely a period of time where people thought Mars movies were super hot, even when they all weren't received well. So I am excited, very excited to jump into, and that might give you guys some hints based off of when Mars Attacks came out. So if you got any guesses, do let us know. We may or may not choose to reveal if you're correct, but I am excited. I do like some of these movies quite a bit. And I'm excited to revisit some of them that I know I haven't watched in a really long time, and some that feature the greatest actors of all time.
If you like Mars movies or think you might have some positive thoughts to share about movies based on Mars that were poorly received upon release, we want to hear those thoughts. Be sure you jump into our Discord. There's a link in the show notes. If you aren't there already, what are you waiting for? It's free. Just open those. No, I always imagine every time I do, the call to action, as they call it in the biz here, I always imagine someone like driving, because that's where I use listen to podcasts, is driving. And, they're driving their car, they're going to work, whatever, and, I'm telling them, hey, you, driving, go jump on our Discord, leave a review. And they just look for, eyes on the road, trying not to make eye contact with me, as if I'm there. They just, act like they don't hear me as they drive to work, you know what I'm saying, as I'm telling them to do these things. That's what I imagine every time I do this. Join the Discord. You at a red light, do it safely, pick up your phone.
I just imagine that like Blues Brothers, where they're driving around. It's like, hey, you two girls, you on the bench, sign up for the Discord.
I should get a megaphone for the car. This would be good advertising for our podcast.
Yeah, and that would definitely not annoy every single person you drive around.
That's
ever.
the rest Discord. What is that? Who is that guy? You know that guy?
Who is this man?
But seriously, you should join that Discord. You can leave us your positive thoughts on these movies. We'll read them on a future episode, and just hang out with the community, talk about all kinds of
good stuff,
nerdy stuff. Yeah, it's a good time. And until next time, until Mars attacks, just remember that maybe not every movie is great,
but all movies have greatness.
Thank you to Mark Benavides for singing our theme song. You can check him out on Instagram at NotThatMarkAnthony. And thanks to Mitch for the music. You can follow him on Twitter at I'm a Biggie Boy, and check our show notes for the SoundCloud link. Check out our store on TeePublic for some Best of the Rest merch. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. It's the only way that we grow. And follow us on social media at BOTRcast. Thank you.
Finn.